Our work with decimals continues today with adding decimals. Our learning target today is that we can add decimal numbers. So your evidence for learning today will be to do just that. Take a couple of numbers that have decimals in them and accurately add them. Quick review of just regular addition. These are whole numbers. These don't have decimals in them. So just a quick review. What do we do when we add? So if you're given this problem, 47 plus 204, what do? How do you add them? What we practiced in the classroom was rewriting and by lining up the places. Often we even used graph paper or those marker boards that had a graph on them so we could line up the places. So notice my ones are lined up, my tens are lined up, and my 100 is lined up. Even though both numbers don't go to the hundreds place, I've lined up by place, ones, tens, and hundreds, and so on, and then I just go ahead and add. 7 plus 4 is 11, so I regroup. 1 plus 4 is 5, and then 2 plus nothing. So my answer to 47 plus 204 is 251. So what do we do if we need to add, but we have numbers with decimals in them? So our problem is 6/10 plus 7/10. Well, third graders, we do the exact same thing. We first rewrite the numbers lined up by place and decimal point. I think, personally, the easiest thing to remember when we're working with decimals is just line up the decimals. And if you line up the decimals, all of your places are going to line up accurately. Your tenths place is going to line up, and your ones place is going to line up, and every other place will fall into place just by lining up those decimals. And then you add like you know how to add. 6 plus 7 is 13. So I regroup. 1 plus 0 is 1. And then I bring down that decimal point. So 6/10 plus 7/10 equals 1 3/10. And if I were to look at this picture, it shows me that 6/10 plus 7/10, or in other words, 6 longs plus 7 longs would give me 1 whole with 3/10 left over. That's what we showed in our answer. Or if some of us kind of visually maybe like to think about those places with markers. So this big black line represents the decimal point. So here we had 6/10 and 7/10. So I know that if this one was 6/10, 6, and I add these here, as soon as I get 10/10, that means I've got 1 whole. So I would bring that 1 whole over here, and then I've got these 3 left. So 1 whole and 3/10 left. So what would I do here? Add 5 4/10 and 7 8/10. You grab a piece of scratch paper or something to write on and you practice. The very first thing you do is rewrite these numbers by lining up the decimal point. And if you line up the decimal point, the places will fall into place. So go ahead and take the time to do that and then add, and you can come back and check. 4 plus 8 is 12, so regroup. 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 7 is 13. Bring down that decimal point. So my answer is 13 2/10. If you like the visuals, if you like to see why all of that is and have it visually make sense, you can pause the video and read through these explanations and these charts. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and practice. You go ahead and add what's 2 6/10 plus 0 7/10. So pause, do this work, come back and check. Did you line up the decimals? 6 plus 7 is 13. Regroup. 1 plus 2 is 3. Bring down that decimal point. Now don't forget that decimal point, because without that decimal point, this answer would have been 33. That has a very different value than 3 3/10. So make sure you bring down that decimal point into your answer. 4 5/10 plus 6 48/100. Now something to note here is that one number only goes to the tenths place. The other number only goes to the hundredths place. Now this is why it's really important we go by decimal. If you line up by decimal as you write these numbers, then these places will fall into place. So notice that when I line up the decimals, it's going to look like this. And what we learned about tenths and hundredths, that is if you have 5/10, that actually means you have 50 hundredths. So you can add that 0 placeholder to hold that place. If there was nothing written in that place, that really meant that there was 0 value in that place. And then if that's more visually appealing for you to add, you can add that 0 placeholder and then add 0 plus 8 is 8. 5 plus 4 is 9. Bring down that decimal point. 4 plus 6 is 10. So the answer to this problem is 10 98 hundredths. So big important point here. Line up the decimals. So you do that here. Here's your practice problem. Rewrite the numbers, line up the decimals, and then come back and check. You can add that 0 placeholder if needed. 0 plus 7. 4 plus 6 is 10. Regroup. 9 plus 3, 12. So my answer is 12 7/100. Of course, we need to know how to add decimals because money, that's where we see decimals. I need to know how to add up my money if I'm out shopping and I'm going to buy something that's $4.40 and something that's $1.99. How much do I need? So line up the decimal points and then go ahead and add. 0 plus 9 is 9. 4 plus 9, 13. So regroup. Remember to bring that decimal down. 2 plus 4, 6. So my answer is $6.39. Now, what do we do here? 14, that's a whole number without a decimal point. So what does that mean? Still line up the places. If I have 14, really what that means is 14 0/10. So I can add that decimal point and the 0 placeholder because I need to line up the decimals. So if a number doesn't have a decimal point, it means it has a value of 0.0. So you can still line up these decimal points. So I've written it as 14.0 plus 2.19. Now I can go ahead and add 0 plus 9, 9, 0 plus 1. Bring down that decimal point. 4 plus 2, and 1 plus nothing. So the answer is 16 19 hundredths. And that's it, third graders. If you just line up the decimal points, you know how to add decimal numbers. So your practice choices today include a worksheet. So open that up and do some work on a piece of paper or print it off, however you like to make that work. The answers are on the last slide for you to self-check. or a couple of IXLs have been recommended to you. One is adding decimal numbers. Now those decimal numbers, they may go higher than than the hundredths place. So there may be numbers that even go up into the thousandths place. So if you like that challenge, you go for it, and you would add them exactly the same way. You just line up the decimals. Or if you'd really like some good practice and some addition, try out adding 3 or more decimals. So you get a whole column of numbers, 3 or more numbers. Again, line up the decimals, and you're good to go.